want you to think about dimensions of fitness. So for our purposes, we talk a lot about 5 dimensions of fitness. You got cardiovascular endurance, muscular endurance, body composition, so it basically means how much muscle and body fat do I have, strength, which is what we're going to talk about today, and flexibility. So those are the 5 big components that make up physical fitness. Now you also have performance variables like balance, speed and agility, reaction time, just to name a few. So when we're talking about training and how we set up our training program, we need to make sure that we're including dimensions of strength. We're going to get more specific about strength training today, okay? So when we're talking about strength, defining it really loosely is basically your body's ability to exert force on an object and to move that object safely, right, without hurting yourself. Let's just take it really, really basic. So getting stronger is a method largely of recruiting the neurological ability, the nervous system first. Think about, anybody have kids? Okay? How, do you remember when your baby started to walk? Okay, what did it look like? Was it just floating like a gazelle? Or was it like the hardest thing in the world? And then over time, they got more efficient, and pretty soon now, how many of you really think about walking? That's neurological recruitment. Your body has figured out how to put a system of movement together and how it can fire in sequence to get the most efficient movement possible. So with strength training, we're largely talking about the nervous system. On top of that, we're looking at some elements of hypertrophy or adding muscle tissue. If we put both together, it's the perfect mix. So those people who are wanting to do more strength training also need to understand we need to also have elements of hypertrophy. All right, and I'll get a little more detailed about how we do that later on. So I think a lot of coaches that are out there that are talking about strength training tend to kind of just put it out as we just need to get stronger. Strength is many things. So think about all those components that I mentioned earlier: muscle endurance, flexibility, cardiovascular endurance. All of those can be dimensions of strength. We want to add strength to all of those. So I want to be flexible but strong. So there's flexibility strength, there's speed strength. There's a lot of different dimensions to strength. I can be concentrically strong, meaning I can stand up or exert force from the ground and jump high, but maybe not eccentrically strong, which means to absorb it, right? 2 totally different dimensions. So we're going to talk a lot about absolute strength and how we can include exercises that increase that absolute strength category. So think about your strength as a jar, right? And you can continue to put quarters in that jar and add. Strength is accumulative, right? The number one thing that we need to be concerned with first, before we start working with a barbell, is stability. What I see people doing a lot in the CrossFit community, our tribers out there, is you walk in day one and they put a bar on your back. This weighs 45 pounds. We're going to be doing some low bar back squats today, and some of your shoulder mobility may be an issue. So guess what needs to happen? Maybe a low bar back squat is not appropriate for you. Maybe a front squat or a goblet squat is. Squat means a lot of different things. We're going to do body weight squats. See how your mobility is. Then we'll do front squats. We're going to do low back squat. So there's a lot of different types of squatting. Not all are appropriate for everybody. Okay? So we're going to go into all of them today. So a couple of pros about using the barbell. First of all, how many people in here have been using barbell in their training? Bench press, squat, deadlift, any of the above, any kind of, okay, good. So a couple of pros. Number one, Once we're able to start using this barbell, it is for the majority of the time we're going to be dealing with gravity in a linear movement. Okay, it's called the bar path. Our body is going to be either on top of or below that bar path. So let's take the squat for instance. When that bar is sitting on top of our back, I'm loading not only the muscular system but the skeletal system. Because I put that load on top of my body, I increase the amount of tension on my muscles, connective tissue, and thus my skeletal structure. So if we can do it safely, one of the best ways to increase density of muscle tissue, connective tissue, and bone is to put a bar on your back. Once again, we need to make sure that we're progressing to that point to where we're able to do that. I would not recommend that people walk right in day one and begin weight training with a 45-pound bar. You're probably not ready. And as we explore today, you'll probably see some orthopedic limitations that you have or may not even know you have, some mobility issues that if you don't address, guess what happens, especially with a bar? They are magnified 10 times over, okay? So technique is very, very, very important. So with a barbell, we're able to load a lot more weight on this thing. If we can begin to train with more weight, we're increasing volume. We're increasing the size and density of the muscle tissue, and once again, the tension that it puts on the body. So we're able to increase or create more hypertrophy. Anytime I say that word, I'm basically talking about the muscles getting bigger, okay? So we're able to put more load on the body with a barbell as opposed to dumbbells, okay? Most movements that are done with a barbell are comprehensive, meaning I can't think of a lot of barbell exercises that don't include every muscle in your body. Even if you're just standing doing a bicep curl, there's no such thing as isolating a muscle group. You may be targeting your bicep, but if you're doing this with a barbell, guess what? You've also included your whole body in an isometric contraction so it can stabilize the joints around it, okay? So you're including a lot of muscle tissue. Once again, incredible benefits. If you're doing a squat or deadlift, you will find out today, and we're not going to train heavy, but even just with perfect technique, you will find out really quickly when you're squatting and deadlifting, there's not a single muscle that's missing. Your eyelids will be sore if you're doing it correctly. Okay, so we're covering a lot of area there. The bar is dynamic, meaning it's moving, right? So it's not a stationary unit like a machine where you sit in and it goes through the range of motion for you. It's not that I wouldn't recommend doing machines, but that is what would be called accessory work, right? This would be a primary movement, a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, Olympic lifts, okay? So this bar is moving. Once again, we want that bar to be moving in pretty much a linear path. The problem gets to be is when we create these moment arms where the bar is moving in a lot of different directions when it should just be moving up and down. We'll explore that a little bit more today. So downside could be that the bar is free, right? So once again, you need to be conditioned. You need to have stability, strength before you start going through these movements, okay? Some cons to it. Probably the biggest con to using a barbell is the only real way to increase is to raise the weight. The best way to increase your ability to do these movements, anything with a barbell, is to raise the weight. Okay, well, we can also increase repetition, we can increase sets, we'll talk about volume, but predominantly when we're talking about barbell exercises, when we're talking about increasing volume, we're talking about increasing the weight. So, another downside to it is my experience with people that really get hooked into barbell training, kind of just visit the same kind of modality over and over. Too much of this excessive heavy load and not enough time restoring joint tissue, connective tissue, muscle, and also the central nervous system. Okay? The central nervous system is recovering totally different than the muscle system. Your muscle may be ready to go in 48 hours. We do 10 sets of squats and 10 sets of deadlift. 72 hours later, you're ready to go again. But your central nervous system may not be. Okay? It's a totally different element to training. And it's how we can begin to overtrain, because once again, we're including so much muscle mass in every nerve in your body. When you start training at capacity, when you really explore what a 1 RM, a 1 repetition max is, and then start moving 75, 80% of that 1 RM to capacity, it's a totally different element. Okay? And you have to understand, until you restore the length-tension relationship in your body from the impact of that exercise, you shouldn't be doing it. You're going to be doing long-term damage. So on top of these movements, you have to understand how to recover from them. I think one more downside to using a barbell that is kind of misinterpreted out there is, just because you can squat 600 pounds doesn't mean you're going to be a better running back. Doesn't mean you're going to be a better gymnast. Doesn't mean you're going to be a better soccer player. Okay? So there's a difference between absolute strength and relative strength, or sport specific. Just because we can squat 600 pounds doesn't make us a better athlete. You now need to take that absolute strength and move it into your sport of choice. So I don't know if any of you have something you're doing outside of here, but I think oftentimes we get confused and say, well, I'm strong. How do I know I'm strong? Well, I deadlift 600 pounds. Well, that doesn't mean shit until you have transferred that absolute strength specifically into the sport of choice. Okay? So today, we're going to be getting into, we're going to start with Romanian deadlift. We're going to do kettlebell swings. We're going to do deadlift. And then we're going to do a couple of versions of bar squats. So we've got a lot to do. A lot of other, well, let's just say we've also got, let's say, the 3 main power lifts: bench press, deadlift, squat. Okay? On top of that, you've got the Olympic lifts, snatch, clean and jerk, and all the fundamental pieces of exercises that build up those. I mentioned we're going to do a Romanian deadlift today. There's bent rows, there's shoulder presses. There are a lot of other accessory type movements that you can do with a barbell we won't cover today. But what we will cover is how you would begin to approach those movements, okay? So, as we start moving into the actual practical of doing this, I want you guys to understand what our priority is in all exercises, not just the barbell. All right? So the number one priority is to protect the spine, the central nervous system. Absolute priority. Number one, okay? If my legs were blown off, could I reattach new legs and walk again?
Yeah.
Yes. If my arms are blown off, can I reattach arms and learn to swing my arms and move my arms again? What does that tell us about where movement is coming from? Okay? Is it coming from my legs, arms, and my limbs, or is it coming from my spine and also the pelvic floor? So when we're talking about that, okay, we have what's called the local stabilizers inside our body. Those muscles are attaching the pelvic floor and the spine, and they're weird names like multifidus, internal obliques, diaphragm. Okay? So believe it or not, the diaphragm is very much a part of stabilizing your spinal position and pelvic floor. And as we increase weight, the importance of understanding how to keep that spine in a neutral position become critical, because therein lies massive amounts of injury. And if we injure the spine, if you hurt a knee or ankle, you probably can still make it through life. You hurt your spine, guys, you're down. That's all there is to it. So we have to protect that spine at all costs. So the word core is used quite a bit when trying to define or address the internal muscles that are controlling the spine in pelvic position, okay? My problem with that is it becomes kind of a noun. When I say core, you guys grab your abdominals up. This is core. Core is not only the muscles that are underneath the abdominals. It's a verb. It also means how those muscles are communicating with the muscles that are on top of them. Those are called global stabilizers. So everything that you can touch, abs, glutes, quads, iliotibial, erectors, everything that you can touch out here, those are your global stabilizers. They will only do their job as well as my local stabilizers. So we'll talk a lot about spine breaking, okay? And 9 times out of 10, I find that if people are having issue breaking their spine, either cervical here, kyphotic in the shoulder, or lordotic, 9 times out of 10, it's because we have an internal firing sequence that just isn't working correctly. We've got a lot of women that have come in that have had children, and after that, the nervous system and the muscles don't necessarily go back the same way. The body just wants to heal, and it doesn't really care how it does it, right? So learning how to find those muscles, called a brace, right? And then move while stabilizing takes a lot of practice and a lot of technique, and we're going to get pretty heavy into it. Any questions so far?
Yes. How do you know when your body has fully recovered to go back? You said your muscles might be ready, but your nervous system isn't. How would you know when your body's ready?
Well, when we're talking about movements like these, if we were to start to include them into a program, right, that's when I would probably start shifting you more towards a body split, where I would say, okay, if you want to do a couple of HIIT sessions, whole body HIIT sessions, we'll do that on these days. We'll squat on these days and do accessory movement. We'll do deadlifts on these days. There's percentages that most people tend to use based on your 1RM. So if I were to coach you and to set a program up, I would be doing it in sets, reps at this percentage, right? I like to train with a heavy and a light day, or a max effort day and a lighter day. One is more technique or a speed type day. One is maximum effort. One of the best ways, without a coach, to know if you are ready to get under load again is how you feel. Are you excited about going in and knocking out some deadlifts and squats that day? Right? Or are you like, fuck, I gotta squat today, I gotta deadlift. If you're not looking forward to it, cue number 1, you are already emotionally fatigued. Emotional fatigue is the first sign of overtraining, and the central nervous system is not ready to go again. So there's a difference between kind of like, all right, I don't want to train, I drank too much last night, I'll go in and get it, and literally like, it's bothering you. In Russia, they keep heart rates on everybody. If they walk in and they begin to address the bar and their heart rate goes up, they stop. If you have anxiety about addressing the bar and your heart rate is already escalating, they'll stop the movement. They'll stop the set. You've already started to overtrain. And overtraining can be a big issue, and we'll talk more about that. Sound good? All right, everybody grab their stick.